Is it a reasonable expectation for Tennessee football to get back to the college football playoff again this year? I asked that question because of everything that has gone on with the Vols this offseason. As Tennessee gets set to start a new season on Saturday, when they open the year against Syracuse, the Vols will obviously face the Orange. They replaced their quarterback. They lost last year in the playoff 42-17 in the first round, not looking like they belonged. Then they lost their quarterback in Nico Iamaleava. That's one of 9 starters they have to replace on offense. Their defense lost its best player to the pros, James Pierce Jr. The best player on the team this year, the most highly touted pro prospect this year, Jamal McCoy, is starting the season hurt. He will play, but he's banged up. With all of that in mind, is it reasonable to expect Tennessee to get back to the college football playoff? And that is the question. That is today's tough question. You guys vote on the poll question now. Is the college football playoff still a reasonable goal for the Vols this year? Yes or no? Let me give you, I just gave you the backstory on why it's going to work against Tennessee. Plus, finally, their schedule's harder this year. Syracuse is a tougher non-conference foe than NC State. Although they do get Georgia at home, they get Alabama and Florida on the road. Those are always their three marquee games, and Georgia's always the toughest one. So you don't really want them at home if your goal is to get a path to 10-2. So now their path looks like more like it's going to be 9-3, which would not get them to the playoff. We'll talk about that later. But with all that in mind, is a college football playoff appearance a reasonable expectation for Tennessee? Let me explain the reasons why there are things working in their favor, despite all this. They do have a lot of youth. Josh Heupel's recruiting will finally be tested, as for the first time since he's been at Tennessee, a majority of players on this roster in the rotation playing this year will be players that he signed out of high school to Tennessee. That'll be the first time that's happened since he's been at Tennessee. There's a lot of real talent despite all of the departures. The receiving core, for instance, should be better. Mike Matthews, Chris Brazzell, and Braylon Staley should be better as a trio than Brew McCoy, who was not healthy last year, Dante Thornton, who was not healthy last year, and Squirrel White, who was not healthy last year. Chris Brazzell actually has some experience returning. So despite the lack of experience at receiver, they should be better. The tackles should be better with Lance Hurd back. David Sanders Jr., indeed a true freshman, but Sanders and Hurd more experience in the system, and both of them actually fully healthy, unlike last year when Hurd and John Campbell Jr. played hurt at the beginning of the year. The quarterback situation, while not as good as it would have been, I think, with Nico Iamaleava back this year, should be better with Joey Aguilar than it was last year with Nico Iamaleava. The interior offensive line worse. The running backs as a unit may be better, but nobody on Dylan Sampson's level. But you see, I'm going back and forth with why the offense could be better. It's actually more 50-50. Special teams comes down to a long snapper because Bennett Brady's a new long snapper. But Jackson Ross and Max Gilbert are both back. Defense, Arian Carter, Jeremiah Thielander, linebacker should be significantly better. Secondary should be worse at the start of the year, but significantly better by the second quarter of the year. Defensive line will be worse. Edge rushers expected to be worse. So you're about 50-50 on each side, and it comes down to your schedule. With that in mind, with the possibility that they actually could be better at a lot of these positions, I'm going to say yes, a college football playoff appearance is a reasonable expectation for the Vols. Now, that does not mean it's likely. That does not mean a return to the playoff is likely. But it does mean that it's reasonable for them to shoot for that this year, once again, given who they have returning, because their path to the college football playoff is beating Georgia at home and then running the table against all the teams they're favored to beat. And they should be able to beat everybody else. We always talk about who's their big upset game because, like last year, Arkansas was their big upset game. Could they drop one of those this year? Well, they have to be road games against unranked teams. 2 of the road games we just brought up are Florida and Alabama. So it would have to be at Mississippi State or at Kentucky. Mississippi State is the most dangerous one, and I've talked to you guys about that. Kentucky on the road, Tennessee always beats Kentucky no matter what. They're going to take them seriously, or they won't, but Kentucky just won't be able to beat them because Kentucky will make mistake after mistake. So with that in mind, with the fact that if they beat Georgia, 10-2 is likely on the table and 10-2 will get them into the playoff, I am of the mindset that yes, a college football playoff appearance is a reasonable expectation for the Vols this year. Does not mean it'll happen. Does not mean it's likely to happen. But it is certainly reasonable to expect it to happen for Tennessee. And it's certainly reasonable for Tennessee fans to hope that happens. Is it a disappointment if they don't make the playoff? Some might see it that way. I'll say this. Tennessee's not at the level yet where back during the BCS days where it was a disappointment if they didn't win an SEC championship early BCS days or compete for the national title. But they are in a 12-team playoff. I think it is a reasonable expectation to make the playoff this year, even if I think there's a slightly less than 50% chance that they will actually do it. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win, white settle, Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com.
The poll question up is the college football playoff still a reasonable goal for the Vols this year? You guys seem to agree with me. A 78% say yes, 22% say no. That's pretty impressive, actually. 78% say yes, 22% say no. I'm with the 78%. I think it's a reasonable goal. Now, again, do they have a greater than 50% chance of making the college football playoff? I don't know. That's a much greater debate. That one's kind of hard to figure out. I would say it's hard for me to say they have a greater than 50% chance. I would probably set their chance at roughly 40%. I'd give them a 40% chance to make the college football playoff. Remember, if last year is any indication, given the conferences, and we saw what happened with Alabama and those teams, if last year's any indication, given the conference, you need to be a top 10 team to get into the playoff. The top 10 got in. Alabama just missed it at 11 because Arizona State had to get an automatic bid and Clemson had to get an automatic bid, meaning Alabama and Miami just missed it at 11 and 13 because of those two automatic bids. So top 10 is where you need to be. We talked about this last week. While the polls don't have Tennessee as a top 10 team, the advanced metrics have them ranging anywhere from 8 to 13. So they're right there, guys. They're right there. That means it is very reasonable to expect them to make the college football playoff. They are probably the hardest team to predict this year. I think Texas is pretty hard to predict. I think Texas is vastly overrated given what everybody's saying about them. But at the same time, I do believe in Arch Manning as a player. So I do think in general that Texas can still be elite because of that. It is still debatable, though, all this in mind, how far Tennessee can go. I think a top 25 finish is almost certain this year. I'd be shocked if they don't have that. But a playoff, while not likely, is a reasonable expectation. And I think that's the best way to approach this.